Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that guilt has simply vanished from human experience. Not that people chose to ignore their conscience. Guilt as an emotion no longer exists. That nagging voice in your head that whispers you should have called your mom, you shouldn't have eaten that entire pizza, you were too harsh with your co-worker, it's gone. Completely silent, forever. Picture yourself at your corporate job downtown, and your colleague Sarah asks for help with a project that's due tomorrow. In the old world, you might have felt guilty saying no, even if you were swamped with your own work. But now, you look at her and say, no, I don't want to help you. I'd rather go home and watch Netflix. No knot in your stomach. No second guessing. No mental gymnastics trying to justify your decision. Just pure, guilt-free selfishness. The immediate aftermath would be chaos unlike anything we've ever seen. Parents would stop feeling guilty about being imperfect, which sounds liberating, until you realize what that actually means. That working mother in suburbia who used to feel terrible about missing her son's soccer game because of a client meeting, she'd stop showing up entirely. Why should I sacrifice my career advancement for a kid's game? The guilt that once drove her to at least try to balance work and family would be gone, replaced by cold calculation of personal benefit. Marriages across America would crumble overnight, but not in the way you'd expect. It wouldn't be dramatic affairs or explosive fights. It would be the quiet death of compromise. Your husband leaves dirty dishes in the sink for weeks because he genuinely doesn't feel bad about it anymore. Your wife spends your joint savings on a luxury vacation for herself because the guilt that once made her consider your financial goals together has evaporated. Why should she sacrifice her desires for yours? But here's where it gets really disturbing. Cheating would become as casual as ordering coffee. That investment banker on Wall Street, who's been faithful to his wife for 15 years despite opportunities. Without guilt, he'd sleep with his secretary on Tuesday and his neighbor on Thursday, feeling absolutely nothing about the betrayal. The emotional weight that once made infidelity feel wrong would be gone. It would just be another transaction, another pleasure to pursue without consequence. The workplace would transform into something resembling the Wild West. Your boss, who used to feel at least a little guilty about overworking you, would pile on assignments. Without a second thought, work through the weekend. Of course you will. It benefits the company. That middle manager who once felt bad about taking credit for your ideas would do it openly, shamelessly. Why shouldn't she advance her career at your expense? The guilt that once created at least some ethical boundaries in corporate life would disappear completely. Customer service would become a nightmare beyond imagination. That Comcast representative who used to feel slightly bad about transferring you to 6 different departments, now they'd hang up on you without hesitation. This is annoying me, and I don't feel bad about ruining your day. Restaurant servers would openly ignore tables that don't look like big tippers. You look like you'll leave 10%, so I'm focusing on the business executives over there. Think about what would happen to charity and altruism. All those people volunteering at homeless shelters, donating to GoFundMe campaigns, helping elderly, neighbors with groceries. Much of that behavior is driven by guilt about having more than others. Remove that guilt, and charitable giving would plummet. Why should I give my money to people I don't know? Their problems aren't my fault, and I don't feel bad about having more than them. The healthcare system would become even more brutal than it already is. Doctors who once felt guilty about spending only 5 minutes with each patient would openly rush through appointments. Next patient, please. I have a golf game at 3 p.m. Insurance companies would deny claims with even more callousness. You can't afford cancer treatment? That's unfortunate, but it's not my problem. And I don't feel guilty about protecting our profit margins. But wait, before you start thinking this sounds like a libertarian paradise, where everyone pursues pure self-interest, consider what you'd personally become without guilt. Remember that time you snapped at your elderly father when he asked you to explain his smartphone for the 100th time. In a world without guilt, you do that every single time without the remorse that currently makes you call him back to apologize. You'd watch him struggle with technology and feel absolutely nothing about your impatience. Your children would grow up in a world where their parents stopped feeling guilty about being selfish. That voice that currently makes you put down your phone when your kid wants to show you their drawing. Gone. Daddy's busy with work emails. Show me later. But later never comes because you don't feel bad about broken promises anymore. Your child learns that their needs don't matter, that promises are meaningless, that love comes with no guilt-driven obligations. And here's the truly terrifying part. Without guilt, there would be no genuine apologies. Think about it. When you apologize now, it's because you feel guilty about hurting someone. Remove guilt, and apologies become strategic tools at best. I'm sorry would only be used to manipulate situations in your favor, never because you actually feel remorse about causing pain. The justice system would face an unprecedented crisis. Plea bargains often work because defendants feel guilty about their crimes and want to make amends. Without guilt, every criminal would fight every charge to the bitter end. I robbed that store because I wanted the money. I'm not sorry, and I'll do it again if I get the chance. Rehabilitation programs would become pointless because the emotional foundation for change, feeling bad about harming others, wouldn't exist. Corporate America would become a sociopathic playground. CEOs who once felt at least some guilt about laying off thousands of workers before Christmas would do it without hesitation. These layoffs will boost our stock price, which benefits my portfolio. I don't feel bad about destroying these families' holidays. Environmental destruction would accelerate because the guilt about leaving a damaged planet for future generations would vanish. Climate change might affect my grandchildren, but that's their problem to solve. Social media would become even more toxic than it already is. That moment of hesitation before posting a cruel comment, that little voice that says, maybe this will really hurt someone, gone. Cyberbullying would explode because people would feel no remorse about destroying others online. This person's political views annoy me, so I'll spend the afternoon trying to get them fired from their job. But let's explore something fascinating. What if removing guilt actually revealed something important about human nature? What if we discovered that many of our moral behaviors are just guilt-driven compliance, not genuine goodness? Would we find out that most people only help others because they feel guilty about not helping, not because they genuinely care? Your marriage might actually improve in some ways. All those passive-aggressive behaviors driven by guilt would disappear. Instead of feeling guilty about being attracted to other people and then resenting your spouse for that guilt, you'd simply acknowledge the attraction without shame. I find my co-worker attractive, but I choose to stay faithful to you because I value our relationship more than a moment of pleasure. Honesty without the emotional baggage of guilt might create cleaner, more direct relationships. Parenting could become more authentic. Instead of guilt-driven helicopter parenting, I must attend every school event or I'm a bad parent. You might make more rational decisions about your involvement. I'll miss your school play because I have something more important to do, but I'll be at your championship game because that matters more to you. Children might actually prefer parents who make deliberate choices rather than guilt-driven ones. The workplace might become more efficient without guilt about saying no to unreasonable requests. Employees would set clearer boundaries. I won't work weekends because I value my personal time more than impressing you. This might force companies to hire adequate staff instead of exploiting guilt-driven overwork. Managers would have to motivate through actual incentives rather than guilt manipulation. But here's the question that should terrify you. How much of your current behavior is driven by guilt versus genuine values? If you stopped feeling guilty about not exercising, would you ever work out again? If you stopped feeling guilty about not calling your parents, would you maintain that relationship? If you stopped feeling guilty about being selfish, what would prevent you from becoming a monster? Consider your most recent act of kindness. Did you help that stranger with directions because it felt good to help, or because you would have felt guilty walking past someone who was clearly lost? Did you donate to that disaster relief fund because you genuinely cared about the victims, or because you felt guilty about your comfortable life while others suffered? Society might actually become more honest without guilt. All those fake smiles, forced social interactions, and insincere compliments driven by guilt about being rude would disappear. I don't like you, so I won't pretend to enjoy your company. This might sound harsh, but it would also eliminate the exhausting emotional labor of guilt-driven social performance. Religious institutions would face an existential crisis. Much of religious behavior is motivated by guilt about sin, guilt about not being worthy, guilt about not doing enough good works. Without guilt, would people still attend church, pray, or follow moral teachings? Or would we discover that fear of guilt, not love of God, drives much religious observance? The dating world would become brutally honest. Without guilt about being superficial, people would openly admit they're only interested in attractive, wealthy partners. I'm not interested in dating you because you're not hot enough and you don't make enough money. This might hurt feelings, but it would also eliminate the false hope created by guilt-driven politeness. But imagine the psychological freedom. No more lying awake at 3 a.m. replaying every mistake you've ever made. No more obsessing over things you said 10 years ago. No more sacrificing your dreams because you feel guilty about pursuing happiness. That working-class kid who feels guilty about wanting more than his parents could finally pursue his dreams without the emotional weight of betraying his roots. And yet, here's what might be the most disturbing revelation. We might discover that guilt is what makes us human, that the ability to feel bad about hurting others, to sacrifice our immediate desires for the well-being of people we love, to carry the weight of our mistakes. Maybe that's not a burden but a gift. Maybe guilt is the emotion that transforms selfish animals into moral beings capable of love, sacrifice, and genuine connection. So ask yourself this: if guilt disappeared tomorrow, would you become a better person or a worse one? Would you finally be free to be your authentic self? Or would you discover that your authentic self is someone you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley? Would a world without guilt be paradise or hell? And maybe most importantly, how much of the person you think you are depends on feeling bad about the person you might become. Without that feeling, the answer might tell you everything you need to know about who you really are underneath all that guilt.